What's good, ladies and gents? Welcome back to MKO Pugilism, aka MKO Boxing, where we talk all things boxing. Remember to like and subscribe on YouTube. Give me a follow on TikTok as well. All that good stuff. Every little helps. So yeah, let's get into this. So main event action at the Copper Box last night saw Tyler Denny getting beaten by George Liddard. So George Liddard, the British and Commonwealth middleweight champion, he hung on to his belts, but it was indeed it was a bit of a war. He had to definitely fight for it. He had to prove himself in there, and for his career thus far, this has been sort of, I would say, kind of the toughest test, the most sort of resistance that he's faced, and overall good performance by him. It was good in the sense that at first it looked like he was going to get Tyler Denny out of there. It looked like a stoppage was inevitable, because there were some of these in those early rounds, there were some of these big right hands he was landing on Denny, and Denny was literally being shifted, like his whole body shook under the force of some of these punches of George Liddard. It looked like his legs had completely gone, and that happened, I want to say, several times. That happened at least, let's say, 3-4 times in the first, I think it was within the first 2 rounds, where he shook Tyler Denny to his boots in those early rounds. And I was looking at it, watching it, thinking, well, this is going to be over very soon. I was thinking, well, the referees over here, our referees over here in Britain, they do jump in quite quick, and I was pretty convinced that watching those first couple of rounds, that's what's going to happen here. Denny's going to get taken out, and he was getting shook with every shot. But to his credit, Denny sort of grit his teeth. He didn't really retreat or run around the ring, or I suppose the only survival tactic was diving in, a little bit of holding. But he bit down on the gum shield and started throwing back and started fighting fire with fire, using some good head movement, and he kind of clawed his way back into the fight in those, going from sort of round 3-4, going into the middle rounds of the fight. Tyler Denny sort of clawed his way back into it and was being very competitive. However, George Liddard would then sort of take over in the middle rounds, going into the championship rounds, but then Tyler Denny would still be having his success. So it did kind of go back and forth, but as the fight wore on, the later the fight got, the more it kind of favored George Liddard. There were a few rounds in there in the latter part of the fight where you thought, oh, maybe Denny's, there were a few times where Denny was able to kind of momentarily stumble George Liddard, and momentarily not hurt him badly, but at least sort of make him stand to attention. So there are a few shots he threw in there, Denny, that got George Liddard's attention. But to Liddard's credit, what he done, he gritted his teeth and he went for it, and he for me at least, he swept through those last couple of rounds, those last championship rounds. He really made sure he put his stamp on it. And although Tyler Denny did have a good surge, I think it was in round 11 and round 12, he had a good surge of activity, a kind of burst of shots where he'd try to throw his combinations, but you'd see in between him throwing those shots, he was getting hurt by George Liddard, and having to take some big shots on the way to his own successes. So you could always see that, okay, this Denny's putting up some resistance, but there's one boss in there. There's really one winner in this fight, and it's always George Liddard. George Liddard just always had the edge, and was always the one that when he's landing his shots, you could tell that he was doing some real serious damage on Tyler Denny. And Tyler Denny, to his credit, he was brave, he was bold, he never gave up in this fight. He always sort of maintained his discipline, and he maintained kind of a winner's mentality, that he wasn't going to give up in this fight. But at the same time, the reality was he was coming off second best. And, George Liddard rightfully won the fight because even in those latter rounds, as I said, Tyler Denny did have a bit of success, but George Liddard just took over with the more powerful shots and was outlanding Tyler Denny in those rounds. So he making it very clear to the judges and to the audience that he was the man winning it. So he goes the distance there, and a very, very well-deserved win and a good performance because he showed that even when he hurts guys and they don't go away, they don't quit, they don't get knocked down, that he can still grit out a good performance and still go through and win the rounds, So good performance by George Liddard. I'm sure he'll go onwards and upwards from there. And also for Tyler Denny, this doesn't really have to be the end of the road for him. Obviously he's in his mid-30s now and stuff, so yeah, not that much time left, but at the same time he can still have more fights, and you never know, he may be able to spring some upsets. But congratulations to George Liddard, hangs on to the British and Commonwealth titles with a very solid performance. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Until next time, MKO Boxing, over and out.